Phil Goode. I'm the mayor of Prescott, and have been involved with statewide, local, and even national politics for a long, long time. So welcome to this event today. I'll be your host, and I'm going to be here talking to the candidate for our LD-1 State Senate, Ken Bennett. Ken, welcome to the
Thank you.
To the show today.
It's good to be here, Mayor. Thank you.
I've been probably an interviewee much more than an interviewer.
Okay.
But I have hosted a few TV segments, so
Okay.
I'll try to do my best today.
I'm sure you'll do fine.
And I hope you all will enjoy this segment. I think there's a lot of interest in some of these current races as we're down to the last 18 days of the primary. And I know there's a lot of people who have not yet made their decision on who to vote for state senate. So I know if you're anything like me, seems like every time I open up my mailbox, I'm getting a new mailer attacking Ken on various issues that, knowing you, Ken, for quite a few years now, I'm pretty certain that most of these charges are very unsubstantiated. And I think it's important for the community and the voters to kind of have an opportunity to hear from you.
Thank you.
So that you can really tell the truth about what these claims are being made for you. So let's start off with at least a couple of questions. I know one of the things that has been claimed is you're a professional politician, been involved
for 37
or 38 years. I know that you started your career as a city councilman for Prescott, but I just don't think those numbers add up.
No, I served for 4 years on the Prescott City Council. I served 8 years in the state senate several years later.
Right.
These were not continuous. And then I served 6 years as Secretary of State. So 4 and 6 and 8 is 18. But yes, I'm being accused of being a professional politician for 37 or 38 years. So I don't know where that math comes from, but it doesn't add up.
Well, that's kind of disturbing if someone can't even have a good handle on the arithmetic. It's kind of hard to say that that representative could handle our state budget and voting on it. And speaking of state budgets, another one of these charges was that you're a tax and spend liberal. So tell us what your experience has been as a public elected representative when it comes to taxing and
Spending. Well, I've never raised taxes, either the 4 years I was in the city council or the 8 years I was in the state senate. In fact, exactly the opposite. My last 4 of my 8 years as a state senator, I was president of the Senate. And during those 4 years, even with a Democrat governor, Janet Napolitano, during the 4 years I was Senate president, we cut taxes. At the time, it was the largest tax cut in the history of the state. We reduced state income tax rates by 10% for all Arizonans. We eliminated the state property tax, and we permanently exempted military and National Guard pay from any state income tax. And I think those 3 tax cuts have probably been saving Arizona taxpayers somewhere around $1 billion a year, every year for the last 15 years. So I've never raised taxes. I think it also accuses me of saying that during the 4 years I was Senate president, that spending went up all 4 years. But the truth is that the very first thing I had to do as a new Senate president in 2003 was to reduce the spending in the state budget that was left by the previous governor. This was just after the recession that followed the 9/11 attacks. So in 2002, revenue wasn't quite coming in as we hoped, or the previous budget had hoped. And the first thing I had to do as a new Senate president and with my colleagues is to cut over $100 million from the state budget spending. So it's not truthful to say that spending went up all 4 years. during my Senate presidency. Now, after we cut spending, then as the economy started to get better in '05 and '06, then yes, spending did go up. But the first thing I had to do was cut spending, not increase it.
Well, it's probably more of a restoration of the state's budget rather than an increase. I know there had to be substantial reductions because we're required to have a balanced budget.
Right.
And the fact that you were able to cut taxes when you're dealing with a pretty well-known Democratic governor.
We had some pretty interesting discussions in either Janet Napolitano's office or mine, and yet we got her to sign the largest tax cut in the history of the state.
Well, I think that responds to 3 or 4 or 5 of these charges on these mailers saying that you were a tax and spender and raising taxes simply isn't true if you look at the record.
I think another one says that all of the new revenue that did come in during the 4 years I was Senate president all went to new spending. That's not true either. I just mentioned that we did $1 billion tax cut from some of that new revenue that was coming in. But when I became Senate president in 2003, the state cash balances were near zero. And the rainy day fund, which is the savings account, was at $13 million. When I left 4 years later, there was $1.2 billion in the state's cash account and rainy day fund balances. So during the 4 years I was Senate president, we went from zero in the bank to 1.2 billion. And yet I'm accused of having spent every dollar on new spending. You can't have done that if you increased the state's cash balances by 1.2 billion.
Well, I know the last few legislative sessions have been very seriously focused on trying to get a budget that can deal with the important issues, but maintain the balance. So clearly you have the understanding of how best to do that. Some of the more recent charges about taking a propaganda tour on
about the 2020 election it was, I think,
to convince everyone in the state that Joe Biden won.
What I did after, as you may recall, because I had been a Senate president.
That's this one, folks.
As I had been Senate president, which is the position that Karen Fann had, who initiated the audit, but also because I'd been Secretary of State, was the chief elections official. After the audit, they asked me to be the Senate's liaison.
Right.
And I drove from Prescott to Phoenix every day for 4.5 months. Never was paid for my time, fuel, or mileage. But I was happy to do so because I wanted to find out whether there were any problems in the 2020 election. I actually even issued a report, which is on the Senate Republicans' state website. It's called the Bennett Report, where we identified 7 or 8 problems that had occurred in the Maricopa County election. One of the claims that's on these mailers is that I somehow said there was no fraud in the 2020 election. I've never said that. And all I did after the audit was done was I went around and did some town halls explaining what we had done in the audit, what we hadn't done, what was still left to be done.
Yeah.
And yet I'm being accused as though I've said there was never any problems with the election. No election is perfect because human beings conduct the election.
Right.
So every time we do have an election, we identify the problems that we had then and try to make sure that we don't have those problems in the next one.
And your experience as Secretary of State tells me that you were intimately involved with understanding all of those types of checks and balances that need to be made so that we have a election result that we can feel confident in.
Absolutely. In fact, during my 6 years as Secretary of State, I oversaw 12 statewide elections, more than anyone alive today, now that Rose Mofford passed a few years ago. And none of those 12 elections that occurred while I was Secretary of State for 6 years had near the problems that we had in the 2020 election.
I thought this particular flyer, because I looked at this one when I got it in the mail, claiming that you opposed President Trump's immigration ban from terrorist countries, referencing a Twitter posting from December of 2015, which was obviously well before
I don't think he was even president yet.
Had won the election. So making that as a reference just is another example of these unsubstantiated claims.
And if you go to that tweet that I sent out then, this was one of the early kind of misstatements that candidate Trump made, where he said we should ban Muslims from coming in from these terrorist countries. All I said is we can't ban somebody based on their religion from coming into the country, but I supported his ban on immigrants coming in from known terrorist countries. So I was doing exactly the opposite of what the charge said. They also said I was supporting amnesty for illegal aliens. I was not at all. I do not support amnesty for illegal immigrants. I do not support allowing them to vote. I do not support even driver's licenses. Right. If they're here illegally, they need to be arrested and returned to their country. Now, if they want to come forward and begin a process to become legitimate and get on a process and pay fines and do whatever, but they ought to get in line behind all the other ones that have been doing it the right way.
Right, who already got in line.
That's right.
And have been waiting their turn.
Yes.
Well, I know one of the other charges that was made was that you're freely accepting money from lobbyists and your opponent would never do that. So comment on that, would you?
Well, just a couple days ago, we all filed our campaign finance reports, and lo and behold, my opponent, who says he would never accept money from lobbyist organizations, accepted $5,500 in cash, and it was one of those lobbyist organizations that was sending out this mailer that probably cost about 20 grand right there. So suddenly, when it's time to attack his opponent, he seems to be readily accepting either their cash or their help.
Right, and if they don't put a label on there that says they're a lobbyist, I guess a political action committee is okay.
Well, that's what we call lobbyist organizations in Arizona, is political action committees, and he's taking not only cash but help from them, tens of thousands of dollars.
If anybody followed my mayoral campaign, they know that I have some experience dealing with opponents that make personal attacks rather than deal with the legitimate issues and the positions that they have. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell me, Ken, your public service goes back to the time when you were a really young man. I think you got 25
when I was elected to the Prescott City Council.
So what actually prompted you to get involved in public service?
Well, it was actually the Vietnamese. And I know you served in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And I don't think you've ever heard this story. But in 1974, when Saigon fell, I was a 15-year-old teenage boy in Prescott, Arizona. And as we started to hear about the news reports of refugees fleeing South Vietnam and ending up in Camp Pendleton and other places in California, my parents, bless their good hearts, decided that the Bennett family was going to help. And so I can very vividly remember as a 15-year-old boy being driven down to the bus station in Prescott to pick up a refugee family from South Vietnam. And it was the Luong family, Luong. And it was a very small man and his wife and their 6-month-old baby daughter in her arms. And then the man's younger brother, who was about my age. And so for the next several months, the Luong family lived with the Bennetts. And that fall of 74, we decided we should take him to a Prescott High School football game. And so we are sitting in the, as you know, concrete bleachers there at the Prescott High football field, watching the Badgers. And at that time, there was a tradition at Prescott High School that when the home football team scored a touchdown, the metal shop, I think, had built a cannon. And that cannon would be fired off at the end of a touchdown by the home team. And so we all stood to cheer the touchdown. And a few seconds later, this cannon went off, just made an immense boom.
And that family.
And the Luong family went face down on the concrete, even the mother with her infant daughter in her arms. And as a 15-year-old boy, I chuckled for just a second until something in my heart said, this is the first time in your life, Ken, that you realize how blessed we are to be an American, to be Americans.
I know, I've made that comment myself before. It's amazing sometimes that those immigrants who come from countries where they were under the control of tyrannical, despotic rulers, whether they were communist or others, they understand the true opportunity and freedom and liberty that they can enjoy here.
And I thank you and every veteran who served, especially in Vietnam, because we didn't welcome you home the way we should have. So welcome home, Mayor.
Thank you, Ken.
But I can remember, I remember that moment. It's one of the defining moments in my life when I realized for the first time as a 15-year-old American boy that if I was going to keep America great, I had to get in the arena and fight for our country and for our state. And it began to occur to me why my dad was on the city council at the time, and why my mom was the PTA president, and why she was my Cub Scout leader a few years earlier, and why they were all involved in trying to make Prescott better tomorrow than it was the day before. And if good people don't get in the arena and fight for our country, we can lose it.
And we're watching how that destruction of our constitutional republic is happening on almost a daily basis. You know, being a citizen and having the obligation that you have is not a spectator sport. You have to be involved, you have to understand, and you have to be able to step up and take your obligations as a voter and as a citizen seriously. Otherwise, other people will take it away, and once it's gone, you'll never get it back. So I appreciate that, and I was actually chuckling a little bit because when I came back from my combat tour, I remember sitting in my kitchen with my family, and a car drove by and backfired, and I dove under the table.
Well, not many Americans understand what you understand firsthand and what that Luong family understood, that the first thing they did when they heard a loud sound was to go face down on the concrete or the kitchen floor.
It was a survival skill. Well, Ken, I hope, first of all, thank you for coming in and spending the time here. I think it's extremely important that the voters have a chance to understand how many of these charges, in fact, almost all of them.
All of them are, other than I did serve in the only thing on these websites and mailers that's true is that I was on the city council for 4 years, I was in the Senate for 8, and I served as Secretary of State for 6.
Well, thank you for your service to our state, for our city, and let's hope that you'll have an opportunity to serve more for us in the state Senate. So I hope everybody that's watching has enjoyed this segment and has an opportunity to understand now truly how Ken Bennett's candidacy will be the best to represent us in the state Senate. And it's a pleasure hosting this segment, and it's a pleasure having you here with us, Ken. And I wish you the very best of luck.
Very good. Thank you.
We only have
August
18
2nd,
days.
August 2nd is the primary election. The general election will be in November. But yes, we're down to 18 days. Republicans and independents can vote in the Republican primary. Independents can also choose to vote in the Democrat primary. But I hope your audience will consider me, and I thank you for your time as well.
Well, thank you for coming, Ken, and I appreciate it. And I hope everybody watching has found this valuable for their decision making before they submit their ballots.